Hi, welcome back to Icon Coaching. My name's Kirk and I'm one of the coaches.
The key is to get started.
In today's video, I want to explain to you why you don't get to create a culture, you have one, and it very likely has you. A lot of people think when they're starting a company that they get to approach culture as though it's a blank piece of paper. They get to start from scratch and make the culture they want or create the culture they want. But here's the thing. As soon as you had the idea of starting the company, a culture already started to emerge. Culture is in the air around you. It's already on board. Just the very idea that you would start a company is the beginning of the creation of culture. Startup Reading runs an event every year called Startup Games, and I've been part of this for the last 7 years. It's an incredible learning experience where we help teach entrepreneurship and what does it take to start a company. And the premise of the weekend is that you get to start a company from scratch in 54 hours. To do that, we gather a whole bunch of people and put them in a room and run them through an experiential learning program. But these people don't necessarily know each other. 72 people showed up this year. We formed 11 teams, 11 companies. And most of the people who joined those teams didn't know each other. They had met that night. And yet, they had started a company. They go out on the floor and they start working. And over the course of the weekend, they're going to work through the whole process of getting a company formed, up, running, and designed. 3 of them this year got all the way to revenue. It's an incredible experience. I get to be one of the mentors and I get to help lead the mentor team. And I've learned over the years that one of the things we have to pay attention to from the very beginning is the culture of the teams. You see, what happens is these teams form and they start dialoguing about their idea and about who's going to do what and how to navigate the weekend. But from the very beginning, a culture already forms. Someone tries to position themselves as the leader. Maybe somebody else is trying to do the same thing. There's the person that wants to be the idea person. There's the one that wants to critique all the ideas. And all these relational dynamics start to form immediately. So I tell the mentors, pay attention to that. Pay attention to it from the very start. Because what happens is, these teams face obstacles through the weekend. They run into challenges. Sometimes they have to pivot entirely when they figure out their business idea isn't going to work. It's a very difficult process. And somewhere on Saturday, typically, some of the teams start to fall apart. They do more than fray. Sometimes they go completely splat. And as mentors, we need to be there to carry them through that experience. To do it, we have to be paying attention to the culture that has formed. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs think they get to create culture. They get to make it up from scratch. It's as if when they start a company, it's a blank sheet of paper. And as they form a team, they get to construct the culture they want. That's not how it works at all. That culture forms the minute you had the thought of starting the company. It is expanded the minute you started to bring people in. Whether you wanted to or not, the culture has already formed. You see, you don't get to create culture. You have one, and very likely it has you. Now, what do I mean by that? When you start to come inside of an ecosystem, a culture that is forming, it starts to shape how you're going to operate. These unwritten rules start to form and you start to follow them, whether you meant to or not. How are we going to resolve conflict? Are we going to resolve conflict? How do we make decisions? How much risk do we take? It's amazing how many of those overlays get constructed without any communication by the team at all. This is self-evident at startup games. And what's amazing about it is that culture forms within minutes of a team forming, a team that just met. And as mentors, we need to be able to pay attention to that because when they hit those struggles, when they hit those challenges, and that team starts to fall apart, we want to know how to navigate that culture to help put them back together. Great leaders know how to do that for their own teams. Great leaders learn how culture works. They learn how to pay attention to the cues around them, and they learn how to affect culture. They understand they already have one, and they figure out what it is. Here is the key principle to know how your culture works. You got to pay attention to behaviors. A lot of times, companies will craft and they'll wordsmith them for days. Core values. They're beautifully written. Sometimes they're in brochures, they're on websites, they're hanging on walls. We have them at Icon. Creating and writing core values is one of the central ways that leaders try to create a culture. But core values that don't convert to behavior are meaningless. Maybe they're aspirational at best, but your culture is governed by your behavior. Your culture is revealed in how people behave. One author says, a culture is nothing more than the aggregation of every one-on-one encounter in the company. Every time people encounter each other, they're behaving, and how all that behavior aggregates together is your culture. If you want to understand your culture, if you want to see it, pay attention to core behaviors. If you like what you see, you might be able to write some core values out of that. You can do an inventory of your behavior and you'll see your culture. And then you can decide what parts of it are working and what parts might not be. And what great leaders can do is see that and then affect change in those behaviors. What's hard about that is you're one of the behavioring units that needs to change. Great leaders know how to affect the culture in themselves, and they know how to share that effect with others. Because you don't create culture, you have one, and it very likely has you.